Super Bowl 59 is here. It is time to build some DraftKings Showdown shippers over at Run the Sims. Let's get deep into the numbers and find the greatest way to try and win $1 million.
It's Short King Summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's Short King Summer.
Super Bowl Showdown contests are sort of the bread and butter of our industry. It's the perfect game, massive fields, massive amounts of money in first place. And that is true whether you're playing in the Mini Max, the Millionaire Maker, single entry contests, or anything in between. We do have a new partner here on the channel. All NFL DFS stuff moving forward is going to be done at runthesims.com. Promo code ENDGAME is going to get you 10% off Run the Sims forever. That's a lifetime price. But right now, it's free for the Super Bowl. So if you want to follow along, you want to generate your showdown lineups at Run the Sims, it is free for the Super Bowl. All you have to do is sign up. We have a great game here for the DraftKings Showdown, a total of 49. The Eagles are 1.5 point dogs. 25.5 point team total for the Kansas City Chiefs, and we have a 23.5 point team total for the Philadelphia Eagles. As always, we are going to go position by position. Normally, I do the show paid on patreon.com/Davis Mattek, but it's Super Bowl week. Run the Sims is free. I'm giving it away for free. What you are looking at right now is the projection page at runthesims.com. If you want to go in and adjust all the market shares, I think that you probably can. We are going to be pressing the premium Sim Runner Pro button here in a second. These market shares honestly look a bit off to me. So before we run the Sims, we are going to make some adjustments. I think that Kareem Hunt is going to move towards more about 50% of the team rush attempts. I think that we can move Isaiah Pacheco. Sadly, he just doesn't look right. I think we need to move him down a good bit. We are going to move Kareem Hunt's market share of receiving up a little bit as well. We're a little bit higher here, so we are going to trim Pacheco down to 4%, and we are going to take DeAndre Hopkins down to 9%. I also think Xavier Worthy looks a good bit low here. We are going to move Worthy up to 22%. We are going to send Nico Remigio to 0. We are going to send Justin Watson even lower. We're actually going to move Marquise Brown down. We're actually going to send Carson Steele to 0 in the passing game. We are 2% high. We are going to send Marquise Brown to 18%, and we're going to send Peyton Hendershot to 0.5% of the targets. That gets us to a nice round number. Going to move actually a little bit of extra touchdown share there to Travis Kelce. That gets us, I think, a little bit more directionally accurate. That's Kareem Hunt as the clear lead back. We have Xavier Worthy as far and away the leading wide receiver, which has been true for the entirety of the playoffs. Let's take a look at the Eagles' market shares. We have Gainwell as, I think, a legitimately questionable guy with a concussion. I think he will probably end up playing. Devonta Smith is not a legitimate questionable. He is going to be active for sure. A.J. Brown with a 30% target share. Devonta Smith with 23%. One thing we actually do need to do is we need to move some rushing share to Goddard. They've been using him on these GT counter polls, which I think is pretty important. So we're going to take a smidgen away from Mr. Gainwell here. We are still 2% high. We are going to take that from Mr. Jalen Hurts, and that should get us to where we want to go. I think these accurately reflect the market. Now, obviously, the projections over at Run the Sims, I'm recording this very early. I'm pre-recording this video. These are going to change, but you can also put them to whatever you want. You can adjust these market shares wherever you want. You think the Eagles are going to win, then you can move the Eagles to 28 points. You think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to blow them out, you can move that up, or you can move the Chiefs all the way down. You can move the Chiefs down to 24% if you would like. Now we're going to run the Sims, and we are going to go position by position. The Sim Runner Pro is running for us, analyzing the playbook. It's a very simple process. We're going to go to the optimal rates after that and then go through. I think it's really interesting anytime we have a showdown contest where one team doesn't use any secondary players. If you think about the Eagles, Jahan Dotson, Grant Calcaterra, Johnny Wilson, Aeneas Smith, Will Shipley, Kenneth Gainwell. These guys do not get the ball. The Eagles are just simply not a team that spreads the ball around. So the guys in that offense who don't use the ball, they are going to be under-owned in this slate. When we get to the optimal results tab here and we start going position by position, you're going to see how true that is. Ownership rates are not final, of course. Looking at this now, I got to say, it does look to me like Jalen Hurts in the optimal rate. In the optimals, he's 12% in the captain, 63% total, 51% in the flex. That seems a smidgen light to me. And the reason why it's a smidgen light is because he is 10,400 and Barkley is 12,000. I think given the discrepancy between those two guys, wouldn't you rather at less ownership have the guy who's going to get all the 1-yard touchdowns? I think that would sort of be the way that I would view this slate. Jalen Hurts had 34 points in the conference championship game. He in what was actually a kind of a bad game for him as a football player against the Rams. He would have been the optimal. He certainly was the optimal flex in that game against the Rams. And then conversely, Mahomes, as more owned in the captain, that is the field sort of flying towards safety. I think what we'll actually see is every Chiefs pass catcher, Worthy, Hopkins, Smith-Schuster, Kelsey, Hollywood, all of these guys are going to be under-owned in the captain by a good bit, and Mahomes is going to be over-owned. Mahomes did have the 2 rushing touchdowns in the conference championship, and don't get me wrong, he is going to run in this game. Kind of my mental projection and what like the lines at Underdog Fantasy would be. He's going to be projected for 6 to 7 rushes, 25 to 30-ish yards, decent chance of scoring a rushing touchdown. But we know that Mahomes is a fantasy asset, kind of really until the last 6 weeks of the season was pretty middling. We also know that the Eagles have the best defense in football. We know that both of these teams really prize possession. Both of these teams are going to try and hold the ball. They're going to have long drives. Now, that can be their plan, and everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Even like a long Saquon Barkley touchdown run, a 70-yard Barkley touchdown run speeds this game up. The Chiefs probably are not going to add that many explosive plays against this Eagles defense. I definitely, and this is coming from me, you know me, I love the Kansas City Chiefs. I think Hurts is clearly the superior option at captain to Mahomes, and if ownership remains constant, then I think I'm going to end up with less of Mahomes in the captain than the field. Quite a bit less, probably. I'll probably be taking more shots on Chiefs skill position players. Moving to the running backs, this is the question that you're going to have to answer of the slate. How many points is Barkley going to get? And at 12,000, can he get 24 and not be the optimal captain? Can Saquon Barkley get the 100-yard bonus on DraftKings and score a touchdown and not be the optimal captain because of the way that he's priced? I think the answer to that question is probably yes. That would be sort of the way that I would evaluate it, especially when you consider the fact that Kareem Hunt is 6,400, Samaje Perine is 1,200, and Pacheco, who, remember, I just nuked him in my projection run. With the way that I changed Pacheco's projection, he is only showing up in 11% of optimal lineups, 11% of winning lineups, barely 1% in the captain. Gainwell, Shipley, Steele, Kari Blasingame, who is playing fullback, basically. I don't even believe he registered an offensive snap against the Rams or against the Commanders, but I think he is active for special teams. Probably the biggest question to answer of the whole situation, though, is going to be, what is the split like between Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco? We saw when the going got tough in the conference championship. 56% of the snaps for Kareem Hunt, 50% of the rushes, 37% of the routes. Pacheco has only played 30% of the snaps in the playoffs. He has only gotten 18% of the team's rush attempts. He has 6% of the team's targets. He's not running routes. He did get 100% of the attempts inside the 5, but remember, Mahomes ended the drives with his legs twice. Perine really only playing long down distance. The Chiefs did not have a 2-minute drill. I do like Perine much more than the field. Perine will probably be one of my biggest stances relative to the field for this entire game. I think that that Jerick McKinnon style role that he plays is likely to be really important against a really stout Eagles defense. And I like Kareem Hunt more than the field as well. 11.6 and 14 points in the 2 playoff games. I think if there's a Chiefs running back that scores a touchdown, it's certainly most likely to be Hunt, probably followed by P. Ryan. Pacheco at his price is just probably going to be a miss for me. $5,200 Pacheco, even in 150 max, even at, let's say he's 8% owned, I still don't think he seems like that strong of a play. Same deal for Gainwell and Shipley. Would not surprise me on the Eagles side if basically no other Eagles running back plays. If we just see Saquon Barkley take every snap at running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. Moving to wide receiver, I think that we are in a pretty interesting spot here at wide receiver. Oh, I gotta unminimize my tab there, where there's just no way around it. AJ Brown is the best play this late. He's less expensive than Hurts. He's less expensive than Saquon Barkley. He's making 12% of the optimal captain lineups, only 40% in flex, which I think is fairly interesting, thinking about the way that lineups are generally constructed. I also like AJ Brown naked lineups. AJ Brown without Jalen Hurts, I think is fairly interesting. Xavier Worthy, of course, remains the best play on the Kansas City side. And then at 5,400, Hollywood Brown will be, I suppose the showdown chalk, as it were. If we look at the distribution of snaps for the Chiefs wide receivers, 90% of the routes and, basically 27% of the targets for Xavier Worthy. DeAndre Hopkins' routes have been slashed. His targets have been slashed in 2 playoff games. Hollywood Brown has got 9% and 20% of the targets with over a 70% route share. Justin Watson has barely played. It has been Juju Smith-Schuster in the playoffs who has upped his routes a good bit. And I think Smith-Schuster is certainly one of the better, actually the best cheap play of this slate at $2,000. I prefer him to Hopkins straight up. I prefer him to Dotson, to Watson, to Johnny Wilson, to Paris Campbell. Now, in these massive fields, these 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 person fields, you absolutely have got to be taking shots on Hopkins, on Watson, on Johnny Wilson, particularly the 200 guys, Johnny Wilson and Paris Campbell. One catch for 6 yards and a touchdown almost assuredly is going to help them be optimal in this game. That wouldn't normally be the case, in a normal showdown slate, but because of the way the Eagles generate points, I think they're going to be incredibly strong. Devonta Smith at 7,400. It's hard to say who is the better pure value. Xavier Worthy at 8,000 or Devonta Smith at 7,400. Devonta Smith only showing up in 31.3% of optimal winning lineup. Xavier Worthy showing up a little bit more at 35%. I think that the way that I feel is that Worthy is so unimpeachably a good play and Devonta is so unimpeachably a good play at these prices that I don't really care about the ownership. One thing I will be doing in the lineups I build by hand using these tools when I change the field, I ran this field at, massive multi-entry milli maker size field. I'm probably going to be drifting more towards AJ Brown at captain and then playing stone chalk there in like single entry and 3 max. I think AJ Brown and captain with Jalen Hurts, with one of the cheap guys. Maybe it's Calcaterra, maybe it's Noah Gray, maybe it's Peyton Hendershot, maybe it's Justin Watson. I mean, you could basically just play, you could play Barkley, you could play Worthy, you could play stone chalk if you have done that. And then obviously any lineup where you don't have Saquon Barkley, do whatever you want. I mean, play the highest projected non-Saquon Barkley lineups. It'd be an interesting thought process. You just go through, you do your 150 set, you exclude Barkley entirely. How plus EV are those lineups? Probably very plus EV would be my guess. So that if you ran these through, you would get a bunch of high EV lineups. The tight ends, we have Goddard for 5,800, Kelsey for 9,000, Noah Gray for 2,800, Calcaterra for 1,000, Hendershot for 200, and then, basically right tackle EJ Jenkins for 200 as well. Noah Gray at 2,800. I am a little bit worried that he ends up getting more owned than Smith-Schuster just because people are more woke to what Noah Gray has done. But look what he did in the conference championship. 20% of the routes, no targets. 20% of the routes and no targets for him is not particularly great. They ran very heavily in that game. They played a possession-based game against the Bills, and I think they're going to do that same thing again. So I do think I prefer Smith-Schuster to Noah Gray, particularly because when we get ownerships flooded in, he is going to be like, he's showing up in 19.4% of the field's lineups in this sim that I ran. He is going to be way over that, I think, in, actual contests. Whereas I think Kelsey at 9,000, Kelsey will be the most underowned play of the slate. Now, he looked terrible. Obviously, Travis Kelsey did in that game against the Bills. Only 14% targets per route run, 16% of the targets. But obviously, the week before, 35% of the team's targets. And Kelsey just played pretty poorly against the Bills. Now he's had another 2 weeks off, a lot of time to rest. It was like a specific game plan thing. This is actually something that Mr. Liam Murphy noted to me, was that he thought the Bills' game plan was going to be all about limiting Kelsey. They did limit Kelsey. Now, Kelsey still did have opportunities in that game for some yak. He just played really poorly. He had 2 really bad drops, and I'm not saying he won't have bad drops, obviously, in this spot, but I think Kelsey looks like the absolute best theoretical play of the slate. If we think about the intersection between projected points, ownership, the amount of time someone shows up in a winning lineup, I think we're going to see, I would bet Kelsey will be 10% less owned in total than Dallas Goedert. And Goddard is a phenomenal play at 5,800. But in my runs, I'm going to be manually making sure that I get more of Travis Kelsey than the field, and probably less of Noah Gray than the field. That will be my gold star play, will be to play more of Travis Kelsey in both the captain and in the flex than the field. Moving to the kickers, we've got Bucker, we've got Elliott. These guys at 5,000 for Bucker, 4,800 for Elliott, they're both going to be overowned relative to what their projections are. I can bet your bottom dollar on that. And then I think the same thing could certainly possibly be true for the defenses. For the defenses, we have $4,200 for the Eagles, $4,000 for the Chiefs. I'll probably be significantly over the field on both of those defenses. I like both of the defenses more than I like the kickers. But look at the kickers in relation to the rest of the field in terms of price. Guys less expensive than the kicker who can pretty easily get 12 or more. We have got Noah Gray, DeAndre Hopkins, the Eagles defense, Pirine, the Isaiah Pacheco. Honestly, Pacheco at his ownership, he's a terrible play, but relative to his ownership, he's going to be better than the kickers. Smith-Schuster, far better. I think Calcaterra leverage is pretty strong. I would maybe even rather play the Eagles shitters, Johnny Wilson, Paris Campbell, than them. Shipley at 2,400 because Gainwell is questionable is quite funny. But that is a look at the overall distributions. Now we can look at some of the top expected value lineups. These are the lineups with the greatest in the money percentage, the greatest expected value, as you would expect, dominated by Saquon Barkley and the captain. The top lineup is Barkley, Devonta Smith, Harrison Butker, sort of interesting, Jalen Hurts, Samaje Perine, Xavier Worthy. We have a Mahomes captain lineup, Mahomes, Hopkins, Chiefs defense, Kareem Hunt, Barkley, and Worthy. I think the 5-1 Chiefs onslaught and the 5-1 Eagles onslaught will be a little bit underowned relative to the field. When I get there, I'm probably going to do some of the advanced filters. These are going to be some of the things that I'm going to do. Predicted dupes for me is going to be less than or equal to 9. That is normally the number that I do. I'm going to do max 2 of kickers and defenses. I might do max 1 quarterback. It's kind of hard for me to see both of them getting optimal. And I think you could potentially do the min 1 dust ball rule for a subset of your lineups. And what that is there's a filter here on Run the Sims that says lineup must contain at least blank players with fantasy point projection less than 4. And you can go to your projection tab here and see what you have. So these are the guys who are projected for less than 4. Pirine, Juju, Dotson, Gainwell, Calcaterra, Watson, Wilson, Hendershot, Shipley, Paris Campbell, EJ Jenkins, Carson Steele, and Kari Blossengame. You could maybe even extend that filter to 6 to get Hopkins, Pacheco, the defenses, and Noah Gray in there. It's kind of hard to say. I would not do that for the entirety of my run, because you don't want to lock yourself out of what ends up being, the nut combination because of a rule. But I do want my lineups to reflect less dupes. Some of the rules that I will do: I'm not going to allow a defense captain. I'm not going to allow a kicker captain. I'm not going to allow 2+ running backs from one team. I'm not going to allow. Actually, I will allow a quarterback captain with 0 pass catchers. I think that one, because of Hurts, I think has such a great chance of hitting. Certainly, I'm going to allow onslaughts with a minority captain. So that would be, Barkley with 5 Chiefs in the flex. And I actually do not want to allow lineup frequency, which means the amount of time that a lineup shows up as the winning lineup or an in the money lineup. And there are going to be some guys that I'm going to exclude from the captain. I go through and I exclude a lot of the dust balls from the captain, exclude Kenneth Gainwell and Paris Campbell and guys like that. And most of the time, you don't even have to do that. Oh, another thing that I think is pretty key to do is we want to do a maximum salary remaining of $49,600. That's right about the right number for me. That's going to get us deeper in the combos. Although you see that did trim out a number of our high expected value lineups. But again, it's not always about expected value. Sometimes it's about finding ways to not find duped lineups. And these lineups that I have in here, very unduped, right? Mahomes, Goddard, Juju, Hunt, Barkley, Worthy. That's going to be a weirdo lineup. That is just not going to be a lineup that is reflected all that often by the field. So that is, I think, what is a pretty comprehensive look at what to expect for Showdown, how to use the Run the Sims tools. You can just use the little download CSV button right here. You download the CSV. It's going to get you in a nice little file. You can directly copy and paste those lineups over to your DraftKings spreadsheet. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Check out Run the Sims. And thank you very much for watching.
It's Short King Summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's Short